Jim, here she is, the RLS Legacy. Isn't she grand? We'll sail where no man has gone before. Well, no man that is except for Captain Flint. Oh, and his first mate, of course. Oh, and his entire crew of pirates. Well, that's a lot of people, actually.
So, cabin boy, there's an initiation test for new recruits to this crew. You think you can manage it?
I'm ready for anything you got, Bright Eyes.
Three, two, one.
Welcome back to Treasure Planet, and this minigame where we climb on the ship's mast and collect 10 flags is actually an exploration of all of the platforming mechanics to their fullest. So it's technically a minigame, but it's also the closest thing this game gets to having good game design. The mechanics are really basic, as you've seen, super basic. But the game does its best to explore the gliding mechanic here. I'm not super cynical about this game, so I want to believe that them exploring the platforming was intentional with this. Especially since it has the most harrowing jumps in the game. They may not look super harrowing, but the controls in this game aren't great or anything. You have lots of time, so unless you fall down twice, you're probably gonna make it. The biggest problem with this minigame is that the flags don't follow any real pattern. The arrow tells you exactly where to go, and the arrow doesn't ever point in any confusing direction, so that's more than I can say for some better games, but the flags also follow no sensible route at all. I guess this is also the closest the game comes to having really sensible environmental platforming. I mean, these masts aren't laid out like any real masts would ever be laid out, but it's less ridiculous than the environmental platforming in the rest of the levels. Also, I know this game isn't super concerned with fidelity with the movie, but in the film they use solar sails, not these normal looking sails. I mean, they're kinda normal looking anyway, but these definitely aren't the sails from the movie. When I play games like this, especially ones where there's no clear set design principles, I have to wonder how they got the ideas for the stuff they did have. Like, what made them decide to give Jim a glide ability? Just gonna kill our fellow crewmate, don't worry about it. But as I was saying, what made them decide to give Jim a glide ability? Why use Morph for the glide ability but not any other transformation abilities? I mean, I know they couldn't exactly do what they did with Muppet Monster Adventure, where they made Kermit transform into different kinds of monsters to platform. But there's lots of possibilities with having a sidekick that can transform into different objects and stuff. Did they just not have time to expand on the concept, or could they not think of anything else? In Treasure Planet on the PS2, which was handled by a different developer and is a much different game, they also have Morph, and he does a lot more than just transform into a glider. Treasure Planet on the PS2 is based very heavily on Jak and Daxter, so if you remember Jak and Daxter, you probably remember the eco panels, like there's blue eco and yellow eco and red eco. Well, Morph takes place of the eco panels. You step on a panel and Morph transforms into something that you can use for a limited time. It's not the most inventive thing, but it's a lot more than what they did here, where Morph's just a glide. Only one more flag to get, and it's on the very edge of the ship. I know a lot of people may not be super patient with this game, but I've played it too much, so it doesn't bother me.
Well, cabin boy, you may have survived and earned yourself this trinket, but I'd still watch my step if I was you. Yeah!
So we just finished a minigame, but we're immediately going to go ahead to do another one. We're going to go ahead right into the captain's quarters, or the bridge, I'm not sure what you call it. I'm sure I could remember if I thought hard enough. But we're going to go talk to the captain and do another light gun minigame. Except this game doesn't have light gun support. Which, I guess that makes sense, because why would you bother programming a light gun just to work with Treasure Planet? But I guess I didn't plug in a gun con to find out either.
Mr. Hawkins, there are no passengers on this voyage. In the event of an emergency, you may be called upon to man the plasma cannons. Therefore, you'll need to engage in some cannon training. Are you ready to begin?
Aye, Captain. I am ready to engage the enemy.
Three, two, one.
So this mission, you may have noticed, is very similar to the bird shooting mission, but there's some new mechanics in this one. For example, we have a score that we need to reach in order to complete it, and we also have a hit counter in the lower left. So it's just different enough from the bird shooting minigame. There's also the fact that the asteroids break into pieces after we shoot them, which means we have to pay slightly more attention. The only way I've ever lost this minigame is by just completely phasing out and not paying attention to what I was doing at all. I guess it's not a bad minigame, but it kind of gives me flashbacks to Math Blaster, which isn't a good thing. And I'm not sure if that's this game's fault or not, or if that was the school. That might have been my school's fault. As for the criteria to finish this minigame, you need 500 points or more, I think it was. And it's very hard not to get 500 points as long as you're defending yourself from the oncoming meteors. Or space debris, I guess, is what they called it. It'd be a lot more exciting if we were actually defending the boat from something, instead of just shooting rocks. They're not even real rocks, this is a simulation. I don't know, I mean, when you're putting minigames in your 3D platformer, I understand it's to entertain kids who get bored easily and stuff. But wouldn't it be more exciting if they were actually fending off a pirate attack on the boat, instead of just shooting rocks? I probably still would have liked this minigame as a kid, but I would have liked it more if I were shooting space pirates or something. But I guess the space pirates are on the boat with us. That's a spoiler, but also, if you haven't seen the movie and you're watching this video game, you should be disappointed in yourself anyway. I actually feel really bad because the two friends I streamed this game for had no experience with Treasure Planet. They didn't know what it was about at all, so this was their first experience with it.
Well done, Mr. Hawkins. It seems we might make a space review yet. Pity I'm all out of merit badges, but here, take this as certification that you've achieved the basic space gunnery standard. Carry on.
Yeah, I got enough treasure to open up the next level.
I really like the Treasure Planet film, and I'm used to Disney licensed games not being very good, especially around this era. But knowing that this was the first introduction some people had to Treasure Planet makes me feel kinda sick inside. I feel like we've seen this guy before. I feel like we saw him just a couple minutes ago. His voice is completely different though. Am I being a racist by saying the two aliens look alike? Maybe it's not the same character model and I'm just kinda racist. I should work on that. I like how when the screen gets borders, it cuts off the UI. That looks really goofy. You probably missed it, but it did happen. His face looks so familiar, though. I feel like I've seen it so many times. So anyway, we're headed straight to a third minigame, which will give us our third treasure, and then we can leave the ship. We died, but that's okay, that's why we have extra lives. Anyway, as I said, we're headed to our third minigame on this ship, which will give us our third pirate treasure. And it's actually a minigame we've seen before, pretty much wholesale.
Jim, lad, if the captain's finished with you, I could do with a bit of help down in my galley. Would you help an old spacer out?
Yeah, I'm done with what I was doing for the captain, so what do you need?
Three, two, one.
This level is especially kinda sad because in this part of the movie there was a lot of interesting character development that happened in probably the most remembered scene in the film, for good reasons. But in the PS1 game it's just a collection of 3 minigames, you know, the collect the flag minigame, the shooting minigame, and then this, which is a minigame we already played before. It's exactly the same, they just changed the stuff that's throwing fruit at you. So yeah, a little sad. But I guess it doesn't bother me as much as it might bother other people. And I think that's because I'm just kind of used to this, you know, I've played a lot of licensed platformers, and even though this is worse than most of them, it's still not something outside of my expectations or anything like that. Yeah, it's a cash grab, and Disney didn't care very much about how the product turned out. But that's not unusual, especially for Disney. And I really wanted to share it because it's just so weird. It feels so separate from Treasure Planet, except for its name. It feels like this is a weird, bizarre, surrealistic, minimalist take on Treasure Planet with minigames thrown in. Does that make any sense? The point is it feels weird. That's why I wanted to share it.
Ah, Jimbo. Thank you, lad. Now you know what they say. A crew is only 3 miles away from a mutiny. Here you go. Take this for helping me out of a pinch. Yeah!
So we now officially have all the treasure we need here and we can leave the level. So we're gonna do that.
3, 2, 1.
So I really like this race, but I did say the races were my favorite part of the game. So I guess that's no surprise. There's a lot more obstacles in this one to jump over and avoid, and a lot of harder turns to make. And a lot of pits, too. The final race is probably the best one overall, but this is my second favorite. I also like the really green surroundings. There are some narrative problems, but I feel like trying to point out the narrative problems at this point would just be, beating a dead horse. That's a terrible expression. But you get what I meant. I really shouldn't be pointing out the narrative problems at this point, because there's more problems than there are things right. But they did get the general atmosphere of the location right. You know, the grassy surroundings and the ancient ruins mixed together. That's scenery that's actually briefly seen in the movie around this time. So that's nice, even if nothing else about this makes any sense. Oh, but the gameplay is good. That's important. That's probably the most important part. The boat controls way differently from Jim's Solar Surfer, which is what we used the last 2 times. The boat has a very different weight to it, so you have to adjust to the steering, but not really in a bad way. I mean, you're probably not going to do great the first time you control the boat because you're used to the Solar Surfer, but it doesn't control bad. It controls just different enough to give you a different experience and give the game a bit more variety. And it's nice. The racing sections are nice. I'd like to see Magenta try and make a racing or driving game sometime, but that's not very likely. They mostly made 3D platformers, and like I said last video, no one's heard of them since, like, 2012. It does feel good to be able to say nice things about games like this. You know, it's not a good game, but it feels nice to be able to say good things about it, that there were good things in it. Maybe if the game was just a collection of these 4 races, even though it'd be really short and people would get angry, it'd probably be a lot better, a much better game. If the game was just a collection of the 4 races and nothing else. I could see that being much better, and I will probably have a lot more nice things to say about it, because I wouldn't have to go through the 3D platforming or minigame stuff. And I'm sure they could have added a few more tracks in here. The tracks might have not made sense, but if it's a racing game instead of an adventure game that's trying to follow the story, that makes sense, that's fine.